start is how to pick the right campaign. So getting new leads is all predicated on making sure that you actually have the right kind of offer so that people actually say, yes, I actually want that. So there's a couple of different things you can do and ways of thinking about the kind of campaign that you want to run. And a campaign, the most common one you've heard, is the whole "What's my home worth?" So that's a campaign that's older than the sun, and unfortunately, it also doesn't work as well because people have seen it before. So if you want to come up with something that's kind of new and different, you got to think in a way that is all predicated on a couple of different things. So that's what we're going to go over in this presentation. So the first thing, actually, make it full screen. The first thing you have to think about is who do you want to get more of your business from? So you can see that in terms of where to start. There's two very important questions you have to ask. One is who do you want to get more business from? And that could be from a group of people who are at the same life stage. It could be people that have a common need. We're going to talk about that in just a second. And then the second most important thing is what is their biggest problem or concern? Like what stops them? So if you're looking for listings, what is stopping them from listing their home? What concerns do they have? What information do they need in order to be able to actually make that decision? And once they make that decision to list their home, again, if you're presenting yourself as the one who's giving them that help and the answers that they need, they're going to be much more likely to choose you. Okay, so who do you want to get more business from, and what is their biggest problem or concern? There are two main types of campaigns that you can use that we talked about. One is called a niche. So it's a group of people kind of in a common time of life with similar characteristics. And the targeting strategy you want to use for this is you want to have wide geographics but very tight demographics. So something would be like all of Toronto, but only people who are downsizing, or only millennials, or only maybe people who are going through a divorce and they need some information, stuff like that. So that's a niche. Now, needs is the other one. It kind of applies to anyone, kind of no matter where they are in life, but the need that they have is the same. So it would be someone who wants to list their home and they want to make sure that they get a good price for it. It could be someone who wants to buy. It could be someone who wants to invest. So it's kind of irrespective of age and time of life, but it's more like no matter what, if they're going to make this decision, that they need more information. The targeting strategy you're going to want to use for this one is to go wide on demographics, but you're going to want to go after a very tight geographic space. That would be maybe a couple of FSAs or zip codes if you're in the US. Um, Maybe a couple of neighborhoods that you kind of stitch together, but you're really not putting a lot of interest targeting on top of that. You're kind of going to everybody in that area. So really for something like this sort of, and this would be the example for needs based would be the one you're probably most familiar with is, how to get a price on your home. What's your home worth? That would have very wide demographics, but you might go very tight in maybe a farming area, or maybe if you're in a smaller town, you might kind of go to a certain area of town, maybe the south side of town, north side, or what have you. Generally speaking, that's how you would strategize the targeting for a needs-based program. So a couple of different examples in terms of niche versus needs. I've already shared a couple of those already with you guys. So millennials under niches, millennials, boomers, families, right? So families expanding, need more space, and farm areas. Okay, those are kind of niches. And farm areas can actually go on either side. So farm areas might have common needs, or you might look at a farm area having a very specific group of characteristic or behavior. So that one can kind of go on either side. But make sure if you're choosing, say, okay, I want to go after this particular farm area, that you're being very specific on what it is you're ultimately going to offer those people. And if there is a common characteristic, that you're addressing that, or you're at least acknowledging that that exists. So it could be if you're in like a super urban area that's full of condos and stuff like that, you might want to address whatever it is you're offering and just acknowledge the fact that that is kind of what the landscape looks like. Needs based, as you can see, so how to set your home price, best time to sell, best renovations, how to win a bidding war if there's a lot of bidding wars in your area, especially if it's a strong seller's market like Toronto's been lately, and then to rent or to buy when retiring. So as you can see, these are all answering a question, and that's really what you're trying to be. You're trying to be instructive, and I find that the needs-based examples work really, really well particularly when the problem that they have is very common, very severe, and really is impeding them from taking that next step. So, whether you're going after buyers or sellers, renters, or investment property purchasers, you really try to think of what keeps them up at night and how can you offer something that's instructive and something that they can take action on. Because once someone sees that on their news feed, that's really why they're going to want to take action and say, okay, well, let's explore this a bit further. And the other thing you got to keep in mind is the fact that the people you're presenting this to have probably never heard of you before, unless you've got like a super big brand. But a lot of realtors, it's a very competitive space, and getting your name out there is really hard. It's very crowded, and so to have someone see an ad from someone they don't know that is offering them an answer to a question does take a bit of leap of faith on their part. And if as we go through this, one of the things you're going to want to do when you're offering something like, for instance, a PDF on when the best time is to sell, like how to know when to sell and when to pull the trigger, you're going to be wanting to collect their information, their contact information, in order to get that particular download. And so you're going to be asking people to hand something over in exchange for this really valuable piece of information you're offering. And so, if your offer isn't strong enough, if it doesn't answer a question that is impeding them enough from doing what they really want to do, like it's really in their way, they're not going to give you anything and your campaign's not going to work. So, one of the reasons why What's Your Home Worth doesn't work as well now as it used to is people have seen it, they don't really trust it. There have been some smarmier marketers that have kind of wrecked it for everybody else. So you kind of have to be a little bit more creative when you're looking at getting new leads, but you want to make sure that the leads that are coming into you are high enough quality, right? So if you run something like a renovations campaign, you're going to get a combination of people who are doing renovations to get their home ready to sell, as well as maybe people like me. I'm not going to sell anytime soon. My house is perfectly situated for my children, so selling is not in my future, but I do want to improve the value of my home. So you won't necessarily, and sometimes people look at people like me, just using myself as an example, and say, well, that's a wasted lead. It's only a wasted lead if you take it and you throw it in the garbage. A lead is never wasted if you just continue to follow up with them, because if someone comes back to you and says, I'm not ready now, one of the best things you can do is turn around, well, do you know someone who is? Turn that person into an opportunity for a referral. And if you want to go the next step, you can say, okay, I acknowledge the fact that we probably haven't met. If you want to do a quick conversation about kind of what I do before you give a referral for me, I appreciate that, and try to make a way for getting them on the phone. So just because someone says no does not mean the door is closed. Or someone says, especially they just say, I'm interested, but I'm just not ready right now. See if you can turn that into a referral. See if you can sort of stretch that connection and see how far you can get with it. Because a no could actually turn into a yes, just not with that particular first responder. Okay, so try to decide what kind of a campaign you want to offer and to whom, and just make sure that the question that you're providing an answer for is strong enough for them to overcome that bias, that fear, or cynicism, depending on how they are, of handing over ultimately their contact information in exchange for what it is that you're going to be providing to them. So there's basically three steps that you need to follow. We've covered two of them, the problem that they have and then the solution that they're looking for. Again, if we just go back to the previous slide, what you see here on the right would be tantamount to a solution. They're the answer to the question that they have. The service is ultimately how you're delivering that. Most commonly, people will create a PDF, and a PDF is like it's an ebook that you create. You basically write it in Word or whatever system. We use Word, and then we just save it as a PDF. And they don't have to be very long, 1, 2, maybe 3 pages long tops. Give some examples. I mean, again, answer the question that they have. The worst thing you can do is get people to say, "Oh, I have this problem." You say, "I've got the solution," and then what you offer doesn't actually do anything to help them out. That's not going to get you anywhere. So the service, in terms of how you deliver that, most commonly it's a PDF. It can also be delivered through a video. It could be a in-person class that you might be offering, like a buyer's class or a home seller's class, downsizing class, whatever, but it's actually at a physical location. You can do a webinar where you invite people to basically an online class where you can go live and describe things to people, especially if you're going after a younger urban market. That kind of an online opportunity to get people to connect with you, but in their own convenient space can go actually really, really well. If you want to know the number one way of getting online leads, it is actually through a webinar, because the webinar allows people to test drive you, to talk to you, to listen to you, to hear what you have to say before they actually take that ultimate leap of faith and say, okay, you know what, I do want to engage with you as my realtor. And so these three steps, problem, solution, service, are the three that you need to kind of map out for yourself when you're thinking, who do I want to go after and what am I going to be offering as a solution? And that what is the best way of delivering that? If it's a complex solution that you're offering, maybe a video where you can go into a greater description. Maybe it's a webinar where people need to kind of, work back and forth with you. If you do a video, if it's not too long, some people don't like to watch, believe it or not. They prefer to read. See if you can actually just transcribe your video into text, so that if someone chooses to kind of skip to a certain part, that they can do so fairly easily. And there's landing page systems you can get out there that are really effective. I use leadpages.net or instapage.com. Either of those work really well, and what you can do is you'll have that landing page where it has the video at the top, and then you can have the transcribed video text down below. So you can kind of have the video for people who want to watch, have the transcription for people who prefer to read. And remember that wherever you drive people to, whether it's using a lead ad, there'll be another video about that you can watch on how to do a lead ad. But if you're driving people to a landing page, just make sure that there's a call to action so that they can do something once they're done. One of the things you're going to have to account for in all of your marketing, quite frankly, is that you have to tell people what to do. They're not inclined to actually do what you want them to do unless it's very clearly stated, do this, click here, do that. You double the opportunities of someone actually doing what you want them to do when you literally give them instructions. So don't hold back from, saying, please do this. It's not that people are necessarily stupid. It's just that we really need instructions so that people, it's completely clear as to what you want people to do. So here's a couple of examples of campaigns that I have run. We're going to go through 4 different campaigns. The first one is a demographic focus on boomers. So we went after people aged 50 to 64. I generally don't do the 50 to 65 plus because that goes after people into their 80s. They tend not to have as many listing opportunities. So that when we go after boomers, again, we go 50 to 64. For this one, we're using a very broad geographic area, so we'd go to like an entire city, but then we would focus in on people specifically in that particular age group. The problem we were addressing was they don't know where to go because there's so many different opportunities. And then the campaign itself was top 5 downsizing communities to get real value. Okay, so basically what it's talking about is downsizing at a profit. There's another one that I created called 3 Ways to Downsize at a Profit, which is also really, really successful. The conversion rate that you see here, that is based on how many people clicked on the ad, and then from those, how many actually provided their contact information. We had a 35% conversion rate. The industry average is 1%. So if you get more than 1% on a conversion from a campaign, you're doing really, really well. If you're planning on running a boomers campaign, please do note of the fact that these people tend to have a much longer life cycle. So don't expect people to basically hand over their information and say, I'm ready to sell, I'm ready to buy right now. You kind of gotta work those leads a bit. The next one is cultural. Don't be afraid of going after a cultural, specific culture or group of people. So this one example we've got is the Chinese community, but you can also go for the LGBTQ community. There's realtors in the US who are going after the Muslim community. And a lot of this is predicated on likability. And likability, not like, do I like you? But are you like me? And so people tend to, especially certain cultures, they really tend to gravitate towards people who are like them, speak their language, look like them, act like them, come from where they come from, because it's a level of comfort that they have and a level of trust that is immediately established simply because there's a likability. So if you want to go after a certain group of people that are like you, however you define that, don't be afraid of doing that. You're certainly not being exclusive or exclusionary, or if that's the proper term. It's just that what you have specifically relates to people who are like you, and again, is however you define that. So for this one, we had a very broad geographic area and again, a very tight demographic. Obviously, we're going after people in the Chinese community. People in this group are very concerned about schools. They want to be located around good schools. So this one, the campaign was top 5 districts in the city we ran it in, with the best schools. And so that had a 13% conversion rate, that we got from running that particular campaign. Okay, so and again, these conversion rates are going to be all over the map. It totally depends on the how big your target audience is, how much money you're spending on them, the offer, and then certain communities will click a lot on stuff, and certain communities will not. So the Chinese community, the one that we went to here, they tended to be low clickers, but we got some really high conversion and great success after the campaign ran. The next one is situational. So this one is buyers who are frustrated at losing bidding wars. So particularly in the past couple of years in Toronto area, where I am out of, I'm sort of West Toronto in Burlington, but even where I live here, bidding wars were the norm. So you'd go to, put in your offer, and you and 27 other people are then sitting outside waiting to see whose offer gets through. It'd be very, very frustrating if house after house after house that you're putting offers on doesn't go to you. So this one we would go to a slightly tighter geographic area, but maybe not so there would be very little interest targeting. The problem being, of course, how do I get my offer accepted? And then the campaign itself was called Three Ways to Win a Bidding War. That one had a 10% conversion because this is going after people who right now in this moment want to buy a home. At any given point in time, about 5 to 7% of the population is moving. So that we got a 10% conversion off the people in this geographic space was actually really, really high. So again, it's all a matter of managing your expectations when you're running a campaign to know how many people need this right now. And if it's a small group that need it, but they are high converting, then it doesn't matter. Like if you need 10 conversions and with people in the sort of in trying to buy right now, are really needing this like right this minute, you can get 10 conversions out of 10 leads. Whereas for a more broad campaign like, top renovations to improve the value of your home, you might need to get 300 people to fill in the form before you're going to get those 10 conversions. And when I say conversion, again, I'm talking about like sort of the next step conversion of turning into a client. Okay, so again, manage your expectations of what you're offering in terms of how many people are going to need it. If it's not a lot of people are going to need it, however, your ultimate close rate is going to be high off that small number of people, then that's still a very good option for you to choose for a campaign. The last one is a life situation, so people who are about to go through a divorce. This one, you go to a fairly tight geographic area, and you add some interest targeting on top of that, so that you can make sure that you're choosing people who are in that particular time of life. So the problem is I don't want to get hosed when I engage in the real estate side of this mess. Divorces are rarely ever smooth processes. And so there can be a lot of animosity or a lot of confusion as to what to do with the matrimonial home. And so the campaign that we ran for this one, we've run it a couple of times, is three real estate mistakes to avoid when divorcing. And that one had a really high conversion rate. The other thing about divorce campaigns is they tend to be people who need some help in the immediate future. So again, when you're looking at how many people are going through divorce, I mean the stats statistic is I think it's over 50% of marriages end in divorce. So, sad statistic, but there's a lot of people out there that really need your help as realtors to guide them through the process. So, it's not like you're trying to be an ambulance chaser. You're trying to offer support and make sure that mistakes are not made and people don't lose money or make the wrong decision when they're going through this process. And so, they tend to be people who not only get high conversion, but they also need your help really quite right now. So those are the ways that you go about picking a campaign. Hope you guys have found that helpful. If you ever need any help, you know where to find me.